Hi folks, Thomas Henson here with thomashenson.com, and today is a very special episode of Big Data, Big Questions. So today we're actually going to do an interview with Xavier Morera, and we're going to be talking about Cloudera, some of his Cloudera work and courses at Pluralsight, and just his journey into Cloudera and the Hadoop ecosystem as a data engineer. It's a really interesting story. I hope you'll enjoy and hope you'll join in and find out more about it. So without further ado, let's jump right into that interview. Hi folks, welcome back. Today I'm excited about an interview that we have. We have Xavier Morera here. Xavier, say hi to the audience.
Hello, how are you?
Very excited about doing an interview today. Xavier has a lot of courses out in Pluralsight. So, I'm a Pluralsight author, and so I thought it'd be great to bring Xavier on and talk a little bit about some of his knowledge and some of his things around data engineering, but also kind of what is he learning about, and then also, find out what his journey was into big data. So without further ado, Xavier, how about you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
So, hi, as Thomas said, I'm Xavier Morera. That's just the right way of saying it in Spanish.
Sorry, I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. I'm from Costa Rica, so if you don't like my courses, at least you can watch, you can contact me for travel tips or anything. I can help you on that. So, basically, I started in about 2001 with a company called Artensoft, Artificial Intelligence Software, and what they did was they did migrators to move from old code to new code. That was BB6 to BB.NET, and they were trying to do like Java to C# and a bunch of other stuff. And they were working directly for Microsoft. And one of the things that they did was they sent us to do some presentations, and some people at Microsoft noticed me. And, well, basically, I was put into training at Microsoft in Building 20. If you're familiar, that's where people used to go to learn. All Microsoft partners used to go. So that's basically where I started on the training stuff around maybe 2002. I worked on that for several years. I had to travel the world. I gained like 70 pounds doing that, but I did meet a lot of interesting people, and it was quite fun. After that, I got a little bit out of training, but at that point, that's around 2009 or so, that's when I learned about Pluralsight, and I became a subscriber. And I was a subscriber for several years. And I was working on other stuff that was not exactly training related. I was more of a developer, and I was in the search space. The search space at the time was considered a little bit different from big data, but basically right now, big data, everybody thinks and says and knows that search is just one aspect of big data. So one day within the company, I had to do the same trainings over and over and over again, and I sent an email to Pluralsight out of the blue and said, hey, I would like to be a trainer. And they were like, okay, we'll just go through the interview. You just have to present an audition. So it just took me maybe 2 years to get to the audition because I was very busy, and firstborn and secondborn and life comes in. And one day I said, yeah, I think I'm just going to give it a shot. And I built the audition like in about a week, and they accepted me, which was good. And I had to work full time because I just mentioned 2 kids, and I just going through all my stuff. And it took me about 2.5 years of working nights and weekends to build courses while delivering in consulting until one day I was able to become a full-time author, which was pretty much about a year ago. That's when
Congratulations.
I started.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it took me quite a while to get started on that, but the journey is now starting to accelerate, I would like to say, because besides doing stuff for Pluralsight, I'm also doing some stuff for Cloudera, and which is probably one of the things why we're going to be talking about here, and some stuff that I've done through Cloudera for Microsoft. So it took a while. It was really hard because when you have a full-time job, you have 2 kids, you have a wife, which you love, and you don't want her to just kick you out of the house because you're working 12, 14 hours a day. One of the things that I benefited from was that where I was doing consulting, when you go into a project, there's like initial, like the green field where you just go in and you have to build everything. But then once everything's done, they just want to keep the wheels turning. But a lot of times they don't want to pay for you to be there full time. So when they ask the company, hey, we would like to keep this guy for like 50 or 70% time just to make sure that the wheels are turning, usually companies kind of push back a little bit because if you're a full-time employee, they have to pay you 100% of the time. But I had a special agreement with Search Technologies. That's the company that I was with at the time. So I was like, okay, just pay me, 50 to 70%, whatever time they need, which for them worked great because they didn't have to pay me for non-billable time. And so slowly I started to take advantage of that, first like 20, then 30. I even got to a 50% time to work on courses. So my transition was not like a Band-Aid, like take it out all at once. It was like something incremental. They were benefiting that they could use any time that the company could pay for the billable time, and I was benefiting that I could build work on courses. So it was a rather not too smooth, but it was a lot better than just take the plunge and start praying and hope for the best.
Yeah, so you kind of just edged that boat off the dock. Your story, we've talked a little bit before doing this interview, but I didn't know that your background was in .NET. It's funny, mine. So the way that I got into big data is I was a VB.NET, so I did ASP.NET 2.0 and got all the way up to, I think, the 3.5 where I was working. But I was a VB.NET developer, and I had it's kind of different. It's amazing how our paths are kind of a little bit similar. And so for me as a Pluralsight author too, that was I was a subscriber for a long time, and that was that. I used their training videos. Like I said, I mean, I was big in to ASP.NET and trying to do my job, and to do my job I had to find more training and things. And then when I got into big data, one of the ways that I got roped into Pluralsight because I was requesting more videos. I was like, hey, I really need to, I've got some things that I'm doing for my job, and I have no idea, I'd love to get some courses around Pig Latin and Pig. And then they were like, well, why don't you just make them? And I was like, wait, I'm busy. I mean, I'm asking you. And so it's kind of interesting how it all kind of comes out. So I guess I wonder if we did a poll of most Pluralsight authors now, if previously they were subscribers before, I mean, like you were saying, you'd gotten into it just as a subscriber. I bet that's a common thread there, a common path for a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
Tell me more. So now you're saying, now you've kind of transitioned into, started out doing Pluralsight. It sounds like you were, working two jobs for a long time, like many Pluralsight authors, but now you're doing full-time training. And you said you're doing some things around, with Cloudera. So kind of let's take a little bit of a step back. So you were saying that you kind of got into big data, from search, and you had a background in, search and search capabilities. What kind of interests you into getting into Cloudera and data engineering and the Hadoop community? Where was that like a conscious path, or was that like a project that kind of came up? Where did you start taking the plunge there?
I have a very funny story right there because it involves the CEO of Cloudera, who has absolutely no idea who I am. But a dinner conversation that he had with somebody made me take the plunge. So let me tell you, when I was hired by Search Technologies, I was a SharePoint expert. I was even speaking at the SharePoint Developer Conference, and I was doing a lot of work on I started also as VB.NET developer. Yeah, and with Art and stuff, because we were doing the migrators, that was even before .NET was actually officially released, and we had access to the internal libraries because we had to make some code that would run in VB.NET that used to run in VB. So there were a lot of helper libraries and a lot of stuff. This is probably a story that I haven't told to many people, but when I started working Art and Soft, my day one in consulting services, I was employee number 2. And they had no idea how to do this. We were going to work on the same first project. And employee number 1 tells me, like, dude, just sit there. Just comment out every single line that doesn't compile. Let's take that first step. When things compile, we'll just figure out what to do. There was a larger process, and we were actually putting together the process. So we were like the first ones who were trying those things. So that was my induction. So if you ever complain about your your introduction to some company, just think that somebody sit me down and told me just comment out everything until it runs. And it not runs, just until it compiles. But here's the story. So when I started with Search Tech, they hired me because they were doing a project on SharePoint, and they needed some help to get this project. It's a big project for them. I think it accounted for a large part of the revenue at the time. And I had to sit there and do some organization around SharePoint. So I started with them, and then eventually we went into FastDSP, which I'm not that good, but then we went into Solar, which that one, it's quite nice. And the thing was that the CEO of Search Technologies, I have a good relationship with him. His name is Kamran Khan, and he's a very bright person. Search Technologies just got acquired by Accenture. That's some other angle. I'll talk about that later. But whenever the CEO came to Costa Rica, we used to have a tradition in which we sat down for breakfast, and I got a one-on-one time with the CEO, which most of the other employees didn't have. I don't know why we got to this tradition, just maybe because a few presentations that we went together, but, it's a great guy. So we're in one of these talks, and Search Technologies was just doing a project for Cloudera on search and big data, Solar, and all this stuff. And the guy looks at me and says, "Have you ever heard about Mike Olson?" I'm like, "No." So he's the CEO, and not the CEO, he's one of the founders of Cloudera. He told me that thing about how search is one big part of big data, and that's when I got interested, and I started to get into Cloudera. And the thing that snapped with me is how this guy, Mike Olson, has some videos on YouTube and in other places where it motivates you, and it tells you how is it that we got from one huge box database machines to massively distributed parallel processing. So I started to watch Mike Olson's videos and remembering some of the stuff that Mr. Khan said, and that's what got me interested in Cloudera. So one day I was at the office, and the certification from Cloudera, you have to study quite a bit to be able to pass it, but it's totally worth it. And one of the guys comes in and says, "Hey, we need 2 people to get certified." And one of our engineers already took the test and failed it and doesn't want to take it again. So I just went like this.
Raising your hand.
I'll volunteer. So I had to study, and it was quite hard, but I was able to finally pass the test. And then once I passed the test, they have the certification test. They have a next step for partners because SearchTech wanted to be a partner. So they sent me to what's called the Services Enablement Partner Bootcamp.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have an army, so I have no idea how real bootcamp is. But this is...
Yeah, did they have you running? I mean, what are we doing? Jumping, climbing a rope and things like that, or
like sitting down? They sit you down the first day, and you have to work your way until you're able to just get a cluster running. And it's kind of hard because they were teaching some stuff. But the trainer, Michael Ernest, he was a really great guy, and he was a very good trainer. So it's one of the best, if not the best, training that I've attended. I also had to take the admin because there's the on-demand courses in Cloudera. So I took that one as well. It helped me get into the Services Enablement Bootcamp. But once I was able to pass those, SearchTech got whatever they needed to become certified. And I got a lot of knowledge because that's the other thing. Certification can help you land the job, but that's just with a company. You can move companies or whatever, but whatever you learn is yours to keep for life. So that's why training or learning is so important.
Sure.
So that's why I'm so happy to be a full-time author at Pluralsight, plus the stuff that I'm doing with Cloudera. I'm helping other people learn the skills that are going to let them have a better life.
No, that's great. And so a lot of the viewers on my channel here, they're in that maybe 1 to 2 year range where they're just starting out, or they've got a little bit of experience, but maybe they want to transition. What are some of those skills that you teach? Like, and we can just keep it really high level. Like, what areas for somebody that's just starting out, maybe they want to get into the coding side, or maybe they want to get into the administrative side. Like, what do you think those, like, is it HDFS? Like, what are some of the tools and frameworks you would recommend for them to jump in and learn?
So first of all, my background is as a developer,
Mm-hmm.
but the certification that I got with Cloudera and the partner bootcamp and the things that I attended add more admin because I said, okay, if I want to be a good developer, I want to make sure that I know very well what's running underneath. So it's really good to learn. Well, first of all, you need to have like a cluster to where to run your stuff, and that's of course where I recommend Cloudera because not only because I've done stuff with them or I have courses with them, but because I've seen the things that they can do. In that project that they were doing between Cloudera and Search Technologies, they were helping save babies' lives. And they were actually, imagine if you were one of the parents of those babies whose life got saved because a few guys in Costa Rica and in Palo Alto sat down and built some stuff that helped identify some diseases and give your baby's life a second chance. I mean, those are the things that really are life-changing. So it's big data, not just for profit, but with a purpose of letting someone have a fulfilling life. But regarding what you need to know, okay, first of all, you need where to run your cluster. So of course, that's why I recommend Cloudera. And then if you're more on the developer side, for me, what I like the most, or my favorite ones are Spark and then Solar. Those are the two technologies because Spark lets me do a lot of parallel processing, and it's really easy to learn if you compare it to all the other frameworks out there. I mean, you know Pig, and you know that it has a certain learning curve. If you do those same things in Spark, you're like, wow, this is a lot easier. Same if you're working with Java MapReduce. And Solar, it's a search engine. It's blazing fast. We've put some search engines, like really small ones for POCs, and we really load them, and they perform like really, really well. So those are like my two favorite technologies.
No, that's great. And so, yeah, so my background, I've been a part of Hadoop since the early like 1.0 days. And yeah, I mean, even writing a MapReduce job versus Pig, like I think one of the big things is like you can do what you can do in 140 lines of code versus what you can do in 14 lines of code with Pig. But then the same,
Yeah.
like when you look at Spark and the speed of it, I mean, I think
One.
we can, yeah, the speed, and then hey, you can pick your language too, right? You don't have to just write it in Scala or Python. There's options out there. So that's really really cool stuff. So tell me a little bit about kind of. So you've given some recommendations, but what are some of the things that you're working on? Talk about some of your Pluralsight courses, or some of the work with Cloudera, if you can share that with us.
Okay, there are a couple that I probably can't say about what I'm going to work on,
Sure.
which I just started one new one with Cloudera today, and I proposed a new course with Pluralsight last week. But I just finished a course on how to deploy Cloudera on Azure. So it uses several different methodologies. First is with Cloudera Manager, which is how you used to deploy clusters on-premise. That's the usual way, the one that made Hadoop like really simple, democratized big data. That's what they say. But then the second part was on Cloudera Director, which it basically lets you deploy clusters with one click. And then the third one was, but that's infrastructure as service. And then the third one was with something that's called Cloudera Altus, where you basically forget about the maintenance of your clusters. Basically, you just develop your code, and when you run it, a cluster is automatically created for you, or you can have it just up and running. But the thing is that you don't have to maintain that cluster at all. There's no admin tasks. You don't have to do any updates or anything. You just focus on your jobs. You push a button, the thing runs, and it has a lot of telemetry. So there's a thing called workload analytics. So after you run your jobs, you can check to see how it performed, and you can rerun them, just fine-tuning some of the, like, for example, the amount of memory that you want. And then at the end, you're able to optimize your job to run faster on a cluster that you don't have to manage at all. So it's just like magic, I would say.
Yeah, so let me ask you a little more about that. I'm not familiar with it. So that gives you the ability. So not only so I've got a job that I'm running. Say that I'm running some kind of analytics. Maybe the job is trying to predict home prices, right? And so
Mhm.
what you're saying is that I can run that job, and then I can see how it performed, and then I can go back and kind of replay and tune if I added more RAM or did some more configuration changes on how much faster that processing would work. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right.
Wow,
And
wow. So you're using data analytics on the data analytics.
yes, and the fun thing is that you don't have to manage the cluster at all. When
Yeah.
you start the cluster, you just pass as parameters, use this much RAM or uses this much cores. You pass the parameters to Spark, and it's also optimized for multiple execution engines. So if you're running Spark jobs, you can select 1.6 or 2.x, so either one. You can also do Hive, you can do MapReduce, or you can even do for Impala.
Oh, that's really really cool stuff, man. So, how much time do you spend? We talked a little bit about. I know I'm a big advocate of learning, and not just because I'm a trainer to some extent now, and because of the things that I do, but like I think that you should always be learning. Like how do you kind of structure that? How much time you spend learning versus developing content and some of the other pieces? Like, do you have any? Like, I try to do at least 30 minutes a day, of something new that I'm kind of doing. What's kind of any tips or anything like that for people?
So yeah, so basically one of the things that when you're creating a course, there may be a lot of things that you know, but you want to be absolutely sure that everything that you're going to be putting is covered correctly. So when I'm building a course, I know that this is something that people can't usually do, but sometimes I may take from a couple of weeks. I've taken even up to a month, where I just study, test, and run stuff. I can do this now because I'm a Pluralsight author, but when I was working before, I tried to do probably between 4 to 6 hours a week
Okay.
on learning.
4 to 6 hours.
And that's hard. I know that that sounds just 4 hours, but 4 hours on something that's like complicated. So I'm doing now some machine learning courses, and 4 hours of machine learning, it's probably harder than going like 10 hours to the gym, I would say. You
Yeah.
sometimes your head hurts.
Yeah.
So
The math. Oh my gosh, the math.
you had the algebra and the vectors and the stuff.
Hey, tell me more
Oh,
about that cost function.
yeah. But one of the things where I measure myself more than how much time I spend is usually at the end of the week. I sit down and always try to think back and say, how much did I learn this week? And if I didn't learn anything, I feel like I wasted a week because I always try to learn something new. And if I look at who I am now versus who I am last year, I'm like, wow, I've learned so many more things. And stuff that used to be like really hard, now it's like really easy. You know how
Yeah.
there are some levels that at the beginning you don't know that you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
At some point you know that you don't know. But then there's at some point that you know what you're doing, but it doesn't feel like that easy. And then there's a point where you really forget how hard it was.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet, but I've grown quite a bit, and becoming a full-time author gives me this flexibility that I didn't have before because you usually have to be delivering stuff, you have deadlines, and you
Mm-hmm.
have meetings. I got to a point where I sometimes miss meetings because I could be, and this is awful to say, but it could be a week where I'm just working on creating courses and learning stuff. And I'm like, I didn't have a meeting this week. It was so fun, but then I remember the days when I had like 8 meetings in a row, and I was like, yeah, maybe I don't, you that's something I would like to go back to.
Yeah. Well, hey, this has been really amazing. I think we're getting close to the end here. I did want to get any recommendations. So, like I said, a lot of the viewers out here are involved in the data engineering, machine learning engineering, those types of career paths. Do you have any recommendations for anything that you kind of see coming up? We're almost at the midpoint here of 2018. So, anything 2018 and 2019 beyond that we should be looking at? Any kind of concepts or any kind of tools? I know some of the things you were talking about with Cloudera Director and some of those other pieces. But is there anything that you would say, hey, this is something I see coming in the next 6 to 18 months? Of just maybe it's just a trend, right? And so I'm not asking you to give anything away that you're not supposed to, but just any kind of cool tools that you're looking at. Like for me, a couple years ago, I was really into Apache Beam, and I kind of thought that, saw that kind of coming, and maybe it didn't come to fruition like I thought. But anything like that you see that you think anybody in the audience should go out and check out?
So there's two things. One, Spark. Spark is really, really powerful. It's really fast, and it lets you work with big data. But if you go a little bit further, it gets you into machine learning,
Sure.
which, as we know, yeah, it's the future. So I have a couple of courses on Pluralsight there, so I'm a little bit biased there. One on Scala and one on Python, but still, Spark is really powerful. You should watch out for that one. And the other one is the course that I just finished. Not on setting up clusters, but on managed big data, what's called Cloudera Altus. Because with Altus, you can forget about the infrastructure. You can just create your code, just focus on your jobs, run it, tune it, rerun it. You would still probably need to work. You can work with Spark, so they tie together. But those things, manage big data and Spark.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate that. So everybody in the audience, go out there and check out these things. Make sure that you check out any videos on Pluralsight Xavier has out there, and look for his courses on Cloudera. Thanks again, Xavier, for your time.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It was really entertaining.